we are indifferent to what happens to the others, and we just let certain situations grow, because in some ways society which is resourceful realizes that it's not affecting them or hampering them in any way. The other reason being, certain myths that we carry. And one of the myths that we very strongly, we're as a society totally convinced about, is that if you want to protect young girls and women from good families from being sexually assaulted, we need to have prostitution in society so that men can go to prostitute and satisfy their sexual urges. Another major reason why society has been apathetic and there has been an indifference, and every time you see any social issues or any criminal issues, every time the society shows some kind of indifference towards these concerns and these issues, you always see there's a rise in these kind of issues. As a society, we just look at it as a disgrace, at least where our organization is concerned. For us, we look at it as the worst form of exploitation of a human being. We see it as sexual slavery, and our concern erupts out of this fact. Our concern erupts out of the fact that there is a section of society which is forced, coerced into sexual slavery, and for us that is the violation of the human rights of that person. And that's why I feel organizations like ours are more concerned about young girls, young boys and women being forced into sexual slavery. Prerna started its work in 1986 because what we saw in the red light area was 3 generations forced to sell themselves into the sex trade, and not a single generation finding a way out of this vicious circle. Started our work in 1986 in Kamatipura, which was then known as the largest red light area in Asia. And our focus then was to help these children and break the cycle. And what was most encouraging for us was when we spoke to these women who were in the sex trade, every single woman whom we met, and when we asked her what is it and how does she envisage the future of her child, every woman there said that I want my child to lead a life away from the sex trade. The second thing she said was, I want my child to lead a life of dignity. And then when we asked her, define dignity, what do you mean by a life of dignity? She said a life away from sex trade was for her a life of dignity, a life where her child is educated and is working in a sector which is in no way linked with the sex trade. For her was a life of dignity. So that's how we took from there and started our intervention in the red light area with children of prostitutes.
मुझे बड़ा होके डॉक्टर बनना है। और मेरा फेवरेट सब्जेक्ट है साइंस, इंग्लिश और मराठी।
मुझे एसएस में ज्योग्राफी पसंद है सबसे ज़्यादा। स्पोर्ट्स में होता है हम लोग को इंटर स्कूल बास्केटबॉल, फुटबॉल, बेसबॉल, सॉफ्टबॉल, उन सब में सब लोग हम लोग स्कूल पार्ट लेते हैं।
One of the other reasons why there is a rise in commercial sexual exploitation or prostitution, as it's commonly known, is also because of the demand that society creates. So, if men are going to create a demand for commercial sex, then obviously there is going to be a supply, and if you see the demand created along with societal's apathy and indifference, along with this myth that you need prostitutes so that girls from good families, women from good families can move around freely on the streets in the society, then everything matches as to why there has been a rise in prostitution in our society.
मुझे इलेक्ट्रिसिटी इंजीनियर बनना है। जब भी मैं बचपन में था तो मेरी माँ काम पे उधर लगा दी थी और फिर मैं उसमें काम करने लगा तो मेरे को अच्छा लगा मेरे को करने के लिए, तो इसके लिए मेरा वही सपना है, मैं आगे जाके वही बनूँगा।
Every time there is going to be a demand, there is going to be a supply. There is a demand for minors. Few myths linked with it. Let's take for example, men think that if they have sex with a minor, then she would be a clean target, and by clean I mean they would not get infected with HIV or STIs, and therefore they demand for children. The Act in nowhere mentions that prostitution is legal. It's just silent on an adult woman selling her bodily sex in exchange of money. In terms of brothels, yes, it's considered illegal because it's in the context of the perpetrators trafficking young girls and women, using a space to keep them, and using that space not only just to keep them there, but also using that space to entertain customers. So, the whole thing of brothel being illegal is because somebody is making profits out of putting a group of people and forcing them into the sex trade, and that's how brothel keeping was termed as illegal as compared to prostitution per se. And even there the law is very clear that if it is an adult woman, and in India when we talk about a person being adult, then the law very clearly says that it has to be a person above 18 years of age. So, if she is doing it in her own premises out of her own will, then the law is silent, will not take action against such an individual. I think sex trade, the biggest beneficiaries of the sex trade are those who live by selling young girls and women, those who live on the earnings of these women and young girls. So in short, those who are the perpetrators of this organized crime are the people who benefit the most out of prostitution. The other reason why men demand for children is because they feel it it would further enhance their masculinity, and that's why men are supposed to demand for minors. But I personally feel when there is a demand for minors, men are very clear that they want to exploit a minor. So all these myths are just a facade to say, well, I did it because somebody told me, that it would either free me from my STIs, or it would be, safe for me to have sex with a minor because she's not infected with HIV or any other communicable diseases. For me, I feel when men demand a minor, they are very clear that their need is to have sex with minors. And for want of a better word, I feel these men are pedophiles and they just want to have sex with minors.
I go by bus, and sometimes my mother comes to drop me and pick me up.
Because of what they've experienced in terms of stigma and discrimination, we found children themselves not openly talking about their background, not openly talking to their peers about where do they live. Like, I'll just give you an example of this one particular girl who used to come to our organization, completed her 10th standard, and when she got into college, she would always get down 2 stops before Kamatipura. And when we asked her why did she do that, she said, because I did not want, we all boarded, my classmates, we all boarded the bus together, and I didn't want my classmates to see me get down at the stop which was closest to Kamatipura, because I was so scared to face all the questions that they would ask me. And I had told them an entirely different story about my background, and that's why she always got down 2 stops ahead before her actual stop and walked it up for almost 15-20 minutes every day back home. See, I definitely agree that morality should not come while passing any kind of judgments on this particular population. I also feel when we are talking about, looking at prostitution as a form of work, what we need to look at in a country like India is those who are supposed to be selecting this as their profession, are they doing it because as a society we left them no other choice but a life in the sex trade, or are these women are these women in the sex trade today because they were given all the opportunities. They could have selected any career that they wanted, but they still chose sex work. I think the day we can see and answer some of these questions, at least a person like me, I would be in a better position to say whether we should legalize sex trade or whether, you know, we should let women come and just see that as one kind of livelihood option. One, I think as a society, every time we are propagating for legalization, we need to have clarity on what is it that we are asking for under legalization and what is it that we are offering to these women in the sex trade when we are talking about legalization. And I think that's where our problem lies. We have no clue of what legalization means. Everybody who's advocating for legalization, when you ask them, okay, define, give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, step by step, what is it that, you know, is the offer? And I have often found that they've not done their homework. So one, let's do our homework on what is it that, you know, we mean by legalization. And like I said earlier, just because we are not in a position to handle a situation, very often we think if we legalize it, the problem will be solved. So is it, you know, is it our one way of the society saying that we've lost the battle against human trafficking and therefore let's legalize it? I think legalization would give further impetus to human trafficking. There would be more and more traffickers who would just go berserk and get women, get young girls, get all the paperwork done to prove that these young girls are major and sell them into the sex trade. So it's in no way going to curb human trafficking in any way. It will only give it further push.
Thank you.